When the youth refuse to be born, the older refuse to die. The lesson from the Gen Z uh, youth of Kenya. Hello, everyone. This is Facts About Africa, the African channel, your thoughts and changing the narrative. Today's video, I want to share with you what lesson we get from the Gen Z in Kenya. So, all we know that over the past week, occupied the street of Kenya to demand economic justice for themselves and the people of Kenya on Tuesday, June 8, 2024, in uh, the youth of Kenya under the GenZ umbrella led a nationwide protest covering all countries of Kenya against the Finance Bill 2024-2025 proposed by the government of President William Ruto. The Kenya Finance Bill 2024-2025, must like the budget speech which is presented by the Minister of Finance also in South Africa before Parliament is a representation of the government plan to the finance is developmental and welfare program. In other words, is fiscal policy. This typically happens at the beginning of the government fiscal year, which in Kenya ran from July to June. The Kenyan government, in its effort to reduce the budget deficit, opted to raise taxes in the most ill-advised manner, which would negatively affect those who were already struggling to make ends meet in Kenya. The tax hikes target bread, sugar, vegetable oil, and other staple products, which should be zero-rated. The bill also sought to introduce tax on cars, as well as a levy on manufacturing goods, which are mostly consumed by the economically vulnerable and poor in Kenya. The youth of Kenya did not take this economic injustice lying down out of relative obscurity. They came together across tribal and political differences and demand for the scrapping of the financial bill, though the government of Kenya tried to crack down on the protest, which went as far as occupying the National Parliament of Kenya. It did not discourage and demoralize the current youth. Over the past days, more than 200 have been injured, others detained without cause, and with over 20 losing their lives. Even other the soldiers were called to reinforce the police who were using live ammunition against unarmed civilians. The legitimate rage of the Kenyans could not be quarried as a result after days of decisive and unpromising protest action. On Wednesday, 26 June 2024, the President of Kenya denounced that the bill would be withdrawn, a victory for the youth and people of Kenya, without taking away from the important contribution of Kenya youth, people in South Africa. There are some lessons we can learn from the youth of Kenya, but not only in South Africa, to the whole continent of Africa. What is Gen Z? Throughout the protest action, both local and international media branded the revolt as Gen Z protest. The title was also embraced by the young activists of Kenya in their interaction with journalists and on their social media platform. Gen Z stands for Generation Zoomers, born between 1997 and 2012. This generation is characterized by the social scientists as being very active on the internet, technologically savvy, and use their access to the abundant information in the internet to broaden their knowledge and social awareness. This generation is also very proactive on social media network and has been able to run success campaign online. The Gen Z protest in Kenya are an example of this phenomenon. However, what we must learn from Kenya is how the Generation Zoomers youth were able to translate their social media activism to real and physical activism on the street of Kenya Too often in South Africa, people have a lot to say online in their various social media. Network, be it X, Facebook, TikTok, and or WhatsApp train message. This is not for South African only, for the whole continent of Africa. We all have a lot to say about the corruption and failure of government, the very high level of unemployment, inequality, rising crime, lack of basic services like water and electricity, etc. The GenZ of South Africa must draw on inspiration from the GenZ of Kenya and refuse to allow in the wires from one hashtag to another by translating the political reports galvanized online to physical participation on the ground, which this is precisely what the youth of Kenya did, a campaign which began on the wires through various Twitter and TikTok illustration on how this bill would be detrimental to the people of Kenya, in particular the youth, transformed into a nationwide movement which not even the army of Kenya could suppress. How on tribalism? Tribalism and ethnic mobilization have defined Kenya politics from the early 1960s when Kenya gained its independence. The two dominant political parties at the time, the Kenyan African Democratic Union (KADU) and the Kenyan African National Union (KANU), were largely dominated by the tribes, the Kikuyu and Luo. To date, tribalism infiltrated politics, which had culminated in extreme violence such as the election violence of 2008, to the extent that even the smaller political parties which came after were along ethnic lines. Kenyan demonstrations in the past have also played a significant role in fueling tribalism with the hope of blinding the people of Kenya so that they would not be able to see past their tribal differences and focus on the more important socio-economic challenges of Kenya and the failure and corruption of government. That is the modus operation or operand of tribal leaders. They mislead the people to be fixed on tribal and ethnic solidarity in order to hide their gravity, weakness, and inequities. This is why we must commend and salute the youth of Kenya for doing what their leaders could not do, which is to look past their ethnic differences and unite towards achieving a common and justice cause. This was a clear demonstration of their political and cultural tolerance, and more so their political consciousness. The youth of Africa must never allow the old to mobilize them along tribal lines, but rather they must be brought together by their common conviction and desire to free Africa from the shackle of their colonialism and economical dependence. On the conquering fear, a few years before the student uprising in Soweto, Steve Bantu Biko reflected on the political role which gripped black communities in South Africa from the 60s to the 70s. He titled his reflection, "Fear, an Important Determinant in South Africa Politics." Biko described how the apartheid police, the army, and all state security agencies had broken the back of resistance in black communities. There was a deliberate program to install as much fear as possible, such that no one could ever think of resisting against the inhuman apartheid regime, however small in the resistance was. He wrote the absolutely infantile evidence upon which the state built up its cases in some of the tribal doing does suggest to me that they are quite capable of arresting a group of boys playing hide and seek and changing them with high treason. Such was the absent yet clear throughout program to entrench fear among our people. that one could be arrested for merely looking at a member of a police force. We know how that the 76 generation, inspired by the teaching of the Black Consciousness Movement (BCM), conquered this fear and engaged in an uprising which triggered nationwide resistance against the racist apartheid regime. The youth of Kenya this past week, like the 76 generation, was unarmed when its first live ammunition from the police and army of President Ruto. Hundreds were injured and others lost their lives. The use of brute force and violence from the state security forces to the extent of killing is designed to instill the fear to resist against injustice which Biko wrote about. We must therefore draw inspiration from the determination and fearlessness of Kenyan youth. It is the conquering of fear which will see real and meaningful change in Africa.